Scouting and Scouts Canada have a great reputation for giving kids a head start in life. But as the CBC's Fifth Estate has learned in an exclusive investigation, there are serious questions about the way the organization dealt with sexual abusers who infiltrated the ranks of Scout leaders. It reveals the Scouts here and in the U.S. kept secrets, secrets that allowed a Scout leader who preyed on kids in the U.S. to abuse boys here, too, and get away with it for years. That story now from the National's senior investigative correspondent, Diana Swain.
For 100 years, Canadian kids have been drawn to scouting.
To do my duty to God and the Queen.
But Scouts has known for decades it was also a draw for pedophiles. It kept a confidential list of men it kicked out for abusing boys. The list was intended to make sure they couldn't reapply. The Americans kept a system called the perversion files.
The number of boys that these leaders have, abused is appalling.
Tom Stewart is talking about what was found on the list in the United States kept by the Boy Scouts of America. His suit against them for the abuse he suffered revealed thousands of names of abusers. And his lawyer, Tim Kosnoff, says it revealed something else.
The Boy Scouts routinely did not notify the police when they became aware.
In several statements to the Fifth Estate, Scouts Canada reiterated its policy in this country is to immediately notify both the police and child protection services, and insisted that's been the case as far back as we can determine. Which doesn't explain what happened with Richard Turley. The Fifth Estate found the Canadian Scout leader's name in the American files. He was kicked out of Boy Scouts of America in 1979 after admitting to abusing boys in California. The file shows the Americans didn't go to police. Instead, Turley came right back to Canada and to Scouts, where he found more victims, one of whom was Jason Davies. We showed him the American file written before he was abused.
Yeah, it never would have happened. That pisses me off.
In fact, it wasn't until 10 years after Richard Turley was finally kicked out of Scouts Canada that police in this country caught up with him. In 1996, he was convicted of abusing 4 Canadian boys. The Fifth Estate has found no evidence Scouts Canada went to police with concerns when they kicked him out.
Joining us this morning, Diana Swain, with more on her exclusive investigation. Diana, just how many Richard Turleys could there be? In other words, what do we know about the extent of these abuses?
I think that really is the central question. And Scouts Canada, in spite of our request to get more information about how many names they may have on a particular list that shows how many people have been kicked out of Scouts Canada, they haven't shared that number with us. And so the question is open to parents, I think, to ask how much information has been shared over time with parents and with police about how many people may have been kicked out of the organization. We know in the United States, when they had to open up their files because of the court case we just talked about, there were thousands of names in there and thousands of examples of Scout leaders who've been kicked out of one troop and simply moved into another, that the public wasn't alerted, the parents, the kids weren't ever asked, did something go on there, but that the leader was moved from place to place to place. And we certainly see in the case of Richard Turley, that's what happened, where the Americans put him on a list, kicked him out of California for abusing boys there, kicked him up to Canada. That's where they knew he was headed. And then he abused boys in Victoria. And it was many years later before he was convicted for those abuses.
How much information has been shared with Canadian police?
Well, we've asked Scouts Canada, what have you given them? Have you been tracking along the way saying, we kicked this guy out, you might want to take a look. A parent came to us about this, you might want to take a look. They say as far back as they can determine, they've shared all of their information with police. And yet we have found no one who recalls going to the police about Richard Turley in 1985 when he was kicked out of Scouts. And it was a further 11 years before he was convicted. And we know he was abusing boys in Victoria at the time before he was kicked out. So it does raise the question. People had concerns, and had they done any kind of meaningful check, they'd have found out he'd already been convicted of kidnapping and abusing a Scout in California.
You know, many of the cases of abuse that you examined in your report, they occurred years ago.
Right.
So I'm thinking about today. How worried should parents be today?
I think in some measure things have changed, and that Scouts Canada does do rigorous screening now. It asks for a criminal record check and references, and it interviews people, but it's not a foolproof system. And I heard over and over again through our research Don't let your kids go overnight with someone you don't have complete and utter confidence in. And if you have any insecurity about it, go yourself. The Boy Scouts of America, BSA, is often called Babysitters of America. Too many parents who see an opportunity to let the kids go for a night, we'll get some stuff done. It can be very persuasive. And the men I've talked to said that's the mistake their parents made.
All right. Thank you so much for this morning. Diana's full investigation is going to air tonight on the Fifth Estate. It's on CBC television at 9 o'clock, 9:30 in Newfoundland, and you'll see in the course of that report more information about the American files, more about the case of Richard Turley particularly, and other victims, and you'll hear from Richard Turley himself tonight.